Good morning. It is now 10 o'clock and I'm calling the executive meeting of the State Bar Board of Texas meeting to order. With our agenda posting, we invited members of the public to view a broadcast of the executive committee meeting, which is live at www.youtube.com/State Bar of Texas. We also provided instructions on how to sign up to speak at today's meetings. Sign-ups to speak remotely were available until 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time yesterday. Sign-ups to speak members of the public will speak under agenda item 3, and those members of the public joining remotely will remain in the Zoom waiting room until it is their turn to speak. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and the recording will be made available to the public. At this time, I'll call on our Executive Director, Trey Appel, for roll call.
Good morning, directors. Our moderators will unmute participants that are attending remotely in order to conduct a roll call. Please say here after your name is called. Once roll call is complete, all meeting participants attending remotely will be placed on mute. It is also important during the meeting that you keep your video on when speaking. Director Baruch. Here. Director Cavillo.
Here. Good morning.
Director Cardenas.
Here.
Director Clark. Director Barunda Firth.
Here.
Director Forbes.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Huddleston. Justice Learman has an excused absence. Director Rispoli.
Here.
Director Ritter.
Here.
Director Michael Smith. Director Todd Smith has an excused absence. Director Tisdale.
Here.
Director Toby. Is there. I see him. Director Vargas.
Here.
Director Wooten.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, we would like to welcome any members of the public who signed up to speak. Any member of the public joining us in person who wishes to speak should sign a blue sign-in card and return it to the staff. If there's a specific topic of discussion or agenda item you would like to speak on, please list that on the card. If any members of the public have signed up to speak remotely, you will remain in the Zoom waiting room until it is your time to speak, and I will address you to indicate when you may begin. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to speak, and we will notify you when your time is complete. Are there any members of the public? There are no members of the public here to speak. So at this time, I will call on Trey Appel to give the report of the Executive Director.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning again, fellow directors. Want to bring you up to date on some happenings with the State Bar. First of all, concerning the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents, we were proud to host the Southern Conference meeting in Austin over several days last October. The conference brought nearly 100 attendees to the Omni Barton Creek Hotel, and that included presidents, presidents-elect, past presidents, executive directors, and other guests from the Southern Conference. And if you didn't know, the Southern Conference includes not only Texas, but also Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, go Dogs, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, Kentucky, Kansas, and the Virgin Islands. And I believe, based on my memory, that we had representatives from all but 2 of those states at our meeting. We were able to share some great Texas food and hospitality while participating in learning sessions, enabling all of us to be better bar leaders. President Gibson may have some more to say about the conference in her report, but I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Jennifer Reams and Susan Brennan for their leadership in planning the conference, and to Jennifer, Susan, and Tammy Knoll for providing on-site coordination. Our program was just outstanding, and I'm so proud of the effort that went into it in the planning phases. It was very well received. We received many notes of gratitude and appreciation from other bar leaders across the country. And they said that our program was really second to none. And one of the folks who reached out was a past president of the State Bar of Georgia. And they hosted the event a few years back. And he noted that this is a really tough meeting to put on, to accommodate all of the various attendees, and yet reach out to all with our programming, that it makes it interesting to all of them. And he said we hit a home run. So I'm real proud of the effort that we put forth. We made Texas proud. So thanks all who had something to do with that. For the holidays, the State Bar wanted to help families in need, and we were able to accomplish that. The Texas Access to Justice Foundation identified 35 families that State Bar staff were able to assist with Walmart gift cards totaling more than $12,000. Kudos to our staff and the foundation for these efforts. Also this month, we will continue our tradition of producing a free CLE seminar the day before our quarterly board meeting in our host city, this year, Bryan College Station. The updates for solo practitioners and small firms seminar will take place from 2 to 4:30 p.m. Thursday, January 26th at the Hotel Stella in Bryan. Topics include a State Bar update, employment law, family law, criminal law, and legal writing. I want to thank our speakers in advance, and that includes President Gibson, Chair Baruch, and Directors Dwight McDonald, Lawrence Morales, and Kimberly Naylor for their participation in making this a success. My January column in the Texas Bar Journal celebrated Texas lawyers' dedication to pro bono service and highlighted the pro bono tools available to our members. These include the State Bar's Pro Bono Opportunity Portal, which helps connect lawyers to service opportunities throughout the state, and Pro Bono Texas, also which can be found at probonotexas.org, which promotes a one-stop shop for pro bono resources. Also, the State Bar of Texas Pro Bono Work Group, chaired by former Presidents Terry Tottenham and Roland Johnson, recently created a pro bono resource guide. And this guide contains a lot of useful information that I commend to you for your review. And that can be found at texasbar.com/pro bono guide. The COVID-19 pandemic and various other natural disasters have escalated the challenges faced by underserved members of our communities, and this includes some military veterans. In light of that, I'm particularly proud of the State Bar's work as a member of the Texas Coordinating Council for Veterans Services and as the administrator for Texas Lawyers for Texas Veterans program. As you likely know, TLTV is a collaborative effort with local bar associations, legal aid organizations, and veterans service providers to host legal advice clinics for veterans throughout the state. Please take time to familiarize yourself with these resources and help spread the word to our members. Finally, I want to highlight some recent accomplishments of the Texas Bar College. The college was chartered by the Supreme Court of Texas in 1981 and is our bar's first and only professional society of legal scholars. It is now more than 4,800 members strong, and I'm proud to be one of those members. The college recognizes lawyers who make extraordinary commitments to professional education. It also awards grants and scholarships to help in presenting and attending CLE, and other legal education-related causes. Additionally, the college organizes service projects in conjunction with its summer school program every year down in Galveston. And in 2022, it partnered with the communities in schools of Galveston County to bring school supplies to students in need. As part of its educational mission, the college provides scholarships to legal aid program attorneys to attend live CLE courses so that these attorneys are the first to learn of vital developments and changes in their practice areas. To this end, the college established the endowment fund in 2005. And this fund supports educational projects that help improve the lives and practices of all Texas attorneys so that they may better serve their clients. Through the fund, the college aims to bridge the gap in Texas legal communities by providing CLE subsidy grants to local and specialty bar associations and pro bono organizations with limited resources. In recent years, the college has also provided funding for the Oyez education project maintained by our State Bar Law-Related Education Department. And this helps to ensure Texas students and teachers have resources that they need to fully explore the important role of the judicial system and the rule of law in our country and state. And most recently, the college provided funding for the creation of a children's book that will explore what it takes to become a lawyer. You know, that same book that we've all written about 10 times already. So different practice areas will be explored in the book, and characters will portray diversity in the legal profession so that all students can see themselves as lawyers in our world. So we recognize and applaud the fine work of the State Bar College and its commitment to legal education, and we thank them for all that they do. And Madam Chair, that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trey. I was remiss in not telling people that during the remainder of the meeting, if there are board members who wish to speak, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature, and I will let you know when it's your turn to speak. And as Trey Appel mentioned earlier, it's important that you keep your video on when speaking. So now I'll go to my report. It's been a busy time since our last meeting in McAllen. I was able to present in Midland on October 13. Cindy Tisdale was there with me, and we presented at the Court Observation Day in Midland with a great turnout by the Midland Bar Association. As Trey mentioned, Cindy and I were also at the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents Conference in Austin from October 27th through 29th. And what Trey didn't tell you is that the conference, he did tell you it was amazing. He didn't tell you how adept and nimble our team was when not one, not two, but three of the buses, we arranged two, the first one failed. So number 2 and number 3 both broke down. My bus broke down on the way to Lockhart in the middle of the interstate as cars were fleeing by at a fast pace. We got the bus unloaded. We filled as many people as we could, counted them like we were going on off the Titanic onto another bus, and then ordered Uber cars for the remainder of our guests. Trey's bus had to go back to the hotel. I don't think I ever heard how they made it back to Lockhart, but we hosted a wonderful dinner, lunch for them at one of the oldest barbecue joints in Texas. And the people at the conference were congratulating Jennifer and Susan and Tammy and everybody. We were calling Ubers. We were acting like there was nothing wrong, even though we couldn't understand how we could get off of a highway and not get killed. But it was a great conference, and the speakers that we had were amazing. So Texas did the conference proud, and we learned and met so many wonderful bar leaders that I know will be a tremendous resource to the lawyers of Texas and the leaders of Texas for many years to come. I also got to be at the Texas Minority Council Program 30-year anniversary. Karen Chevins is here with us in the room, and it could not have been a better event. Amazing, great group of people, wonderful programming, great attendance. Again, the best program of its kind in the nation. November 10, I had the privilege of speaking to the Amarillo Bar Association about my 3 presidential initiatives, and I was very distraught to learn it wasn't a person who was at the presentation, but a lawyer from Amarillo took his own life on the last business day of 2022, and that just causes me to think we need to redouble our efforts in suicide prevention. This lawyer was a highly successful lawyer with no outward indications of problems, well regarded and liked in his community, and a loving family with a grandbaby on the way. And that just makes me know that our work has not even begun on our efforts with suicide prevention. On November 14, we had the privilege of addressing the new lawyers at the new lawyer induction ceremony. And that was a really great event. I'd like us as a board to think about how we as a board can be a greater resource at that event, because we are seeing lawyers at their first day of being inducted to our profession. And I think we can do even more. The State Bar already has tables about our resources, but I think we as board members could be there as ambassadors to introduce ourselves to those young lawyers and get them to be involved in the bar from the outset of their careers. I want to take a minute to talk to you about the 2023 annual meeting that will be held in Austin. The meeting is scheduled for June 22 scheduled for June 22, 23. It's kind of weird. It's 2022 to 23, but those are the dates of our meeting. It'll be at the JW Marriott in Austin. Leslie Dipple and Randy Howery are co-chairs of this year's annual meeting committee. If you or your firm are interested in sponsoring the annual meeting, there are materials in the bar executive committee minutes and board effect that lists the different law firm and corporate sponsorship levels. In terms of my presidential initiatives, I recently had an opportunity to speak with Greg Sampson, who's with the law firm of Gray Reed as senior counsel and a former director of this board, on a webcast dealing with succession planning titled "Don't Wait, Designate." The video is now available to all Texas lawyers to watch on demand, free of charge, on the Texas Bar CLE website for 1 hour of MCLE ethics credit. This video, "Don't Wait, Designate," is the 3rd free CLE webcast related to my presidential initiatives. The prior webcasts are on suicide prevention and suicide and depression prevention, which was produced in partnership with the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program, and understanding the attorney grievance system. All 3 webcasts are available to watch on demand on the Texas Bar CLE website under the free online classes. There is a real appetite for well-being information and resources among our membership. More than 20,000 members and counting have registered for Just Ask How We Must Stop Minding Our Own Business in the Legal World, which is the online CLE on suicide and depression prevention. And my recent Texas Bar Journal column titled "Securing Your Own Oxygen Mask First" inspired dozens of lawyers to write and thank me for speaking up about the burnout and vicarious trauma and how those issues have affected their own lives and their practices. We will continue spreading the word about these resources, particularly the life-saving services available through the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program and the Sheeran Crowley Lawyer Wellness Trust. In terms of the number of views we've had of our CLE programs, we've had 6,640 online class registrations for what every lawyer should know about the attorney grievance system. And that's only in the short period beginning November 4. So that tells me that there was a great demand and interest in learning more about our grievance system, and hopefully our lawyers and members are now more knowledgeable about this system, realize it's not something to fear, understand that it's fair and impartial. In terms of the Don't Wait, Designate webinar that's been available only since January 1 of this year. We've already had 611 viewers watch that program. That concludes my report. Are there any comments or discussion items from any member of the board? Seeing none, I'll move on to item B on the agenda, which is to consider and discuss the approval of the minutes of our September 13, 2022 Executive Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I think Director Wooten moved to approve and Director Toby seconded the motion. Any discussion about the September 13, 2022 Executive Committee minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it, the minutes are approved. That takes me to agenda item C under the presidential report, which is the performance measures and strategic planning. This is an action item. We are to consider and discuss approval of the updated State Bar of Texas strategic plan. The Performance Measures and Strategic Planning Committee completed its process of formulating strategic goals for the 2022-2023 five-year plan update. You will recall that after the board's strategic planning workshop on July 21 in Houston, facilitated by Elizabeth Dorico, the subcommittee met on September 19, October 12th, and November 2nd to review, refine, and complete the strategic goals, which are before you today in our executive committee materials. These goals have been approved by the Performance Measures and Strategic Planning Committee, which has recommended this for approval and adoption by the executive committee here today. I need a motion and a second to approve the updated State Bar of Texas strategic plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is that
Luis Cardenas.
Luis Cardenas, your name
Carlos.
is Carlos, sorry, Carlos Cardenas, thank you. I have a motion from Carlos. Do I have a second?
Calvillo seconds.
David Cavilla seconds. Is there any discussion regarding the updated State Bar of Texas strategic plan? All right, all those in favor of approving the State Bar of Texas strategic plan signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The State Bar of Texas strategic plan is approved. That takes us to agenda item 6, which is the report from our esteemed chair of the board, Chad Baruch. Chad, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, President Gibson. I'll be very brief. I will, at the January meeting, again, be reminding directors to please get out and speak to their local bar associations and reminding them that we have ready-made kits for them to do so. All of that is available online. We also will be hearing from our 2 candidates for chair-elect. We have received letters of intent from 2 candidates, Dwight McDonald of Lubbock and Kenan Wooten of Austin. So we'll be hearing from each of them. They'll be announced at that meeting, have an opportunity to make their comments. We'll also, at the meeting, determine how we're going to do that, whether it will be by open or secret ballot, although I can't imagine that we're not going to do it by secret ballot. I also will be at the Amarillo Bar Association this week, talking about Marbury versus Madison with my white wig and my colonial outfit. Very excited about that. And Forrest Huddleston got engaged. That's the biggest news in my chair's report. And so I cannot let my report go without sharing that. And that, President Gibson, is your esteemed chair's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Baruch. Are there any comments or questions for Chair Baruch before we moved on to the next agenda item?
Thank you for that, Chad.
My pleasure. Congratulations. We're all very excited.
Congratulations, Forrest, and happy belated birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody.
Good to see you. So that takes us to agenda item number 7, which is report from our president-elect, Cindy Tisdale. Cindy, let me turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, President Gibson. And I apologize, my voice is coming and going at its own will, so stick with me here. Just a few things that I've done since the last time we saw each other. I won't go into a lot of detail. As President Gibson said, I was at the court observance luncheon in Midland. It was well attended. It was actually sold out. President Gibson spoke, and that luncheon recognizes judges, paralegals, and court personnel. And again, it was very well attended. I had the honor of speaking at the Honorable Judy Warney's portrait unveiling in the 257th Judicial Court in Harris County. She was in private practice for 25 years and became judge in 2005, retiring in 2018. And so I had the privilege of speaking as president-elect at her portrait unveiling. Again, very well attended, standing room only. As was that had said earlier, I attended the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents in Austin. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I want to reiterate what Trey said in thanking Jennifer and Susan and Tammy on an outstanding program and outstanding agenda. So thank the three of them if you see them. I also attended the swearing-in ceremony for the newly licensed Texas attorneys. 2,051 attorneys passed the bar exam this year. That ceremony, again, was very well attended. I spoke to the Baylor Advanced Family Law class, which was a lot of fun for me since my son was in that class. And so, yes, I did question him and called him out on the carpet. I spoke at the Advanced Trial Skills for Family Lawyers in New Orleans. There were 133 in attendance there, and 84 attended the replay of that. That was on my second installment, is what I call it, of What Would Ted Lasso Do? The first installment was at Advanced Family Law. Since about half of the attendees had also attended Advanced Family Law, I came up with a whole new 30-minute speech and PowerPoint for those. So that's the second installment. I also did a live webinar with Judge Laura Livingston, and the webinar, can we all guess what it was? What would Ted Lasso do? And it was 1 hour. I combined both of the speeches. We combined it for 1 hour, and Judge Livingston joined me for that. And that was a lot of fun. And that is what I have done to date. I'm going to the Hidalgo County Bar Association in 2 weeks to speak to them. Anyone want to guess what my topic is? What would Ted Lasso do? Apparently that's being well received. And so I love it. And I love being able to speak about that and the ethics portion of it. So that's what I've been up to. Let me update you on the committee review task force. We had our first meeting on December 12th. We reviewed materials related to each standing committee of the bar and developed our process for how we're going to conduct our review this year. Each task force member was assigned specific committees to review. We're going to be contacting the chairs of each standing committee to look at the projects they have been working on, whether there's any overlap with other committees or sections, and whether or not they have any suggestions for improving the committee structures. One thing our task force is going to look at closely is whether to institute term limits for committee chairs and vice chairs. Many of them have served multiple years in these positions, and they tend not to rotate out very much over the years. The good thing, of course, about that is that you have people who are very knowledgeable about their committees and continuity is maintained. But on the other hand, it doesn't really allow for a consistent change of leadership and ideas. We're going to visit with committee chairs to get their input. We do think there might be some amount of pushback on it, but we want to take a close look at it to determine whether changes should be made. If any of you have any thoughts or insight about this, please give me a call. A positive thing we have noticed about committees is that they are continuing to use Zoom and hybrid meetings quite frequently for their meetings. This is saving the state bar, of course, quite a bit of money on travel expenditures. So we're very thankful that the committees are working so hard and diligent with the bar resources. Our goal is to complete our final report by the April board meeting, and we will outline our recommendations to the executive committee and the board at that time. So let me move on to the budget committee. The budget committee met on December.
Interrupt you, Cindy, for a moment. Could I get, before you move on to budget?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask if any of the directors have any comments or questions with regard to the committee review task force. Being none, let's move on to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, President Gibson. So the Budget Committee, we met on December 5th to review the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. After hearing from representatives of the State Bar divisions and departments, the committee approved the fiscal year 23-24 budget as presented. A 5-page copy of the proposed budget is included in your EC packet. If approved by the EC today and the board at the January meeting, then this proposed budget as presented in your packet will be published in the March 2023 issue of the Texas Bar Journal. President Gibson, do you want me to stop there and ask about, let me kind of go through some of the highlights for you. Some of the highlights for the proposed general fund budget are the total budgeted general fund operating revenues is $45,021,806. It's an increase of 2.8% from the prior year's adopted budget. The total budgeted general fund operating expenditures and transfers is $46,570,146, which is a 4% increase from the prior year's adopted budget. The budget for salaries is 6% higher than the salary budget for the current year, fiscal year 22-23. The number of FTEs budgeted for fiscal year 23-24 increased by 5.25 full-time positions, bringing the total FTEs to 271 for the general fund. This includes 2 new positions in CDC, 1 position in the Client Attorney Assistance Program, 1 position in Human Resources, and a half-time position in Accounting and Member Benefits. Excuse me. The recommendation for the board commitments. I'm gonna kind of go through this. Due to significant savings realized by the bar in fiscal year 2022, primarily due to meeting remotely and limiting travel and those expenses, the total amount available for commitment by the State Bar Board is $7,013,466. This represents excess funds from the fiscal year 21-22 financial operations, which has been audited. After hearing from the executive director and the State Bar staff, the Budget Committee plans to make the following recommendations to the board at the January meeting for commitment of the available funds. To designate $609,299 to maintain the level of minimum reserves at 3.1 months of operating expenditures. Designate $1,548,340 to fund operations of the State Bar for fiscal year 23-24. Designate $2,850,000 to reserves to assist in balancing fiscal year 24-25. So we're going on a year ahead, in fiscal year 25-26 budgets of the State Bar. And commit another $255,827 for one-time projects of the State Bar, which would be $9,827 to raise the balance maintained as a reserve for future presidential initiatives to a level of $200,000. Commit $16,000 in professional services for a one-time project to update the Pro Bono Texas website. Commit $30,000 for a one-time project to implement enhancements to the accounting software. Commit $200,000 for a comprehensive compensation study. We're also going to asking to commit $500,000 to the State Bar's Technology Fund. This commitment will fully fund a website update for the State Bar's TexasBar.com website. Additionally, the funds will cover future anticipated costs to replace IT equipment and software and will allow the Technology Fund to project a positive fund balance over the next 5 years. We're also asking to commit $1 million for the Building Fund. These funds are needed for anticipated renovation and repair of the 1415 Lavaca building and to supplement repairs and renovations needed at the Law Center. Excuse me. To commit $250,000 to the Sharon Crowley Lawyers Wellness Trust. And are there any questions about this information about the budget? I will try to answer them. So are there any questions about any of that? No, I see no questions. So at this time, on behalf of the Budget Committee, I move that the State Bar's proposed budget for the fiscal year 23-24 be approved for presentation to the board and for publication in the March 2023 issue of the Texas Bar Journal.
Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Is there any discussion about the proposed budget? If so, raise your hand via Zoom.
Director Clark has a question, I believe.
Are you exercising, Director Clark? It looked like you were exercising, or do you have a
I'm not
question? Director?
exercising. I just need more coffee, apparently. I'm trying to raise my hand via Zoom and I did this.
Oh, okay. So please go ahead and pose your question, Director Clark.
I don't have a question. I'm sorry. I thought we were voting. I'm just a moron.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay, seeing no questions, all those in favor of approving the budget for 2023-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. The budget is approved. Anything further from you, Ms. President-elect?
That's all, President Gibson. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move to agenda item number 8, which is our report from immediate past president, Sylvia Brenda Firth. Sylvia, I'll turn the floor over to you.
And Happy New Year.
New Year.
I'm very happy to report that my general report is short because as the immediate past president, of course, my duties have diminished substantially. But since we last met, I've been busy with the Nominations and Elections Committee, and Santos will be giving our committee report in a little bit about that. But we also, when we were in McAllen, I mentioned to you that the Hispanic Issues section in partnership with the Access to Justice Foundation was going to have another Loteria event, this time on the Dia de los Muertos, and we did that, and it was once again successful. And thank you to all of you that took part in that event and sponsored. We raised over $40,000. And the best about that is it all goes straight to Access to Justice programs. And this year, the Hispanic Issues section asked that funding be sent to Uvalde for the new legal aid clinic that was set up there in response to the needs of the community after the mass shooting event. So we can be very proud of that activity. Right now, I'm busy working with the Women in the Law section, planning a statewide event for the International Women's Day on March the 9th. So you all will be hearing more about that as it comes forward. We're excited to try to do something that will occur all over the state at the same time. So we'll be tapping you all for that. So that concludes my general report, but now I've got some really exciting news for you with regard to the building committee. As you recall, I took over that committee chairmanship so that Jerry Alexander can run for state bar president. He was our past chair. So we have some really exciting developments to report to you. And this is going to be a little bit long, but hopefully you all will be just as excited as I am and as the building committee was yesterday when we went over this. Our report will be comprehensive because we have quite a bit of information that we want to share with you before we bring it to the board. And I believe that Luma Jafar is on in case we have really specific questions about the project. You may recall she is the project lead with the architecture group, the Lawrence group. So the committee and the state bar staff have been meeting with Luma and her team to develop programming and space needs for the building, Lavaca building. And they put together draft renderings of the proposed building and a floor plan that we're ready to share with you all. We're going to be showing them to you shortly, but before we do, I want to give you a little bit of background information about the project. The Lawrence Group provided us with several design concepts that include potential multiple stories and pricing estimates for the construction. And the committee decided on a particular design structure that you all will have the opportunity to review and hopefully approve today. We approached this project with several primary goals. The first was to keep the number one, the first is to come up with a project that will serve the needs of our membership. statewide. So that you'll see how this project grew when we began discussing how that could be accomplished. But because of the historic nature of the building, we have to keep the historical elements and the significance of and recognize the significance of the main building. We have to be consistent with the capital improvements underway at the Capitol complex. We're right on the corner and we need to be respectful of our neighbor. We wanted to develop a meeting and education conference center and focus on a large CLE space and space to conduct board meetings and receptions. We wanted to develop a space that can be used by sections and committees and bar affiliated organizations. And most of us have been involved at that level and know how difficult that can be to find affordable space in Austin when you want to gather a group to do state bar work. We wanted to design a space where lawyers can use small conference rooms and offices when they visit Austin. And we wanted to design a campus feel with the law center and put a nice outdoor area with the view of the Capitol if possible. And we believe we've accomplished all of those goals with the proposed design. I'd like to highlight some of the benefits of the building and the potential cost savings that have been identified. Our staff has put together savings and revenue estimates for conducting meetings and CLE in the 1415 building. The main cost savings will include hotel costs and staff travel. Hotel expenses are typically very high, and simple items like a gallon of coffee or AV charges can be very expensive. If you had to put together a meeting, you know how quickly that adds up. And using our own facility will allow us to eliminate the majority of those costs, as the building will provide an infrastructure for which to conduct meetings and the events. And additionally, the State Bar can identify and use local catering companies to find the best value for our events. Common costs for the events always includes room rentals, food and beverage minimums, meeting expenses, staff travel, AV rental, internet fees, and attrition rates for attendees that do not show up. And this Texas Bar CLE staff developed an initial estimate that we could see a potential savings of approximately $300,000 to $400,000 a year by bringing in courses that are currently conducted off-site there in Austin. That's a very conservative estimate, and it could be higher as they look to bring even more courses into the Lavaca building. The staff also believes they can produce additional revenue on top of that by being able to offer those courses via live webcast, because we would design the equipment on site into that building in order to allow for that. Conducting board meetings in the new structure will allow us to save hotel room rental fees and staff travel costs. And a conservative estimate of the savings is $15,000 to $20,000 per meeting. We will also make the building available for section meetings. They'll be able to move their meetings and events to the Lavaca building and avoid paying exorbitant hotel costs. And that'll be a huge benefit for large and small sections. I know from my time as being on council for a local government section, that was a frequent complaint for us, a problem for us. It's a very small section with not a lot of resources, and we're always looking for meeting space. So this would help. We have seen that hotel costs have skyrocketed. We expect they're going to continue to increase exponentially over the coming years. So having our own facility will help mitigate that expense. On the revenue side, we know that the State Bar we know from past experience from the Dallas and Austin local bars that use of event space has a great potential. The bar will pursue opportunities to rent the meeting space in the building when not being used by the lawyers. We believe the spaces in the building, particularly the board meeting room and the reception area that we'll be showing you in a little bit, will be highly sought after by numerous groups in Austin, particularly during the legislative session. We don't have any specific revenue and estimates for rentals yet, but we will do a market survey and come up with a plan for renting space. As I mentioned before, the Austin Bar Association rents the Hilgers House for functions, and we know in Dallas the mansion is also used in that way. So moving on to a little bit more about the building, we learned that there's some limitations that we had to work around. So the first was lack of space. The existing structure does not have a lot of available space. That is also compounded by the fact that the building codes require us to have multiple restrooms, stairwells, and elevators for a multiple story structure. These things make significant amounts of space and don't give us additional workspace as much as we would like. Because of that, we've had to be creative, and we say we, but it was Luma and her team. They were creative and incorporated a cantilever design into the space. Adding a cantilever to the building has given us significantly more space to work with, and that will help us meet our needs. The second limitation was historic preservation. The building was built in the early 1880s, and it was designated as a historical landmark by the Austin Historic Commission. There are several walls and structures to which we cannot make changes. And you'll see that in the design that the architects have kept to keep these historical elements while blending it with the new. And we've tried to optimize as much space as we could, given the amount of space we have and the limitations of the historic building. Since it's a historic landmark, we will seek the approval from the Austin Historic Commission for the design of the project. The project will be submitted to the commission, and there will be public hearings held where the commissioners will vote on the project. We would commence that project if the board approves the preliminary design at the board meeting on January 27th. So the project will begin moving as soon as we can garner the support of the board. Okay, so now here comes the good part. We'd like to show you the design and the renderings of the building. If you please put those up on the screen. I'll tell you that the committee looked at several options and designs and voted to approve this particular design we're presenting to you today. And I'm going to cover the highlights, but if you have any questions, just raise your hand, and if I don't see you, I'm sure Laura will, and we'll stop and answer your questions. The building is a 3-story structure that has a large conference room with a mezzanine on the first floor, smaller conference rooms and offices on the second floor, and the third floor consists of a meeting space and outdoor reception room. So slide number 1. This slide shows the first floor of the structure. I'm going to do so I can see it as well. The main entrance to the building is on the east side that faces the Law Center. This is to orient it and help with that campus feel. There's another entrance on the west side of the building and other exit doors, but the main entrance faces the northern portion of our surface parking lot. The reception area is the purple space in the drawing. There's a large open space here in blue that will function as shared workspace with couches, tables, chairs, and it's our intent that it will serve as a nice place for lawyers to gather. We had that request for some lawyers come to town and they're waiting to go to their hearing. They have no place to go because maybe they've just flown in for the day. This would give them a place to park, have access to internet, and be comfortable while they're waiting for whatever their meeting, et cetera, is. That's one of the elements that would be of service to our memberships. There's a break room kitchenette that you see in beige, and that will serve as a place for caterers to set up, and will also be a place to grab drinks. We didn't plan for a full kitchen because of all of the additional approvals that would be necessary, and we didn't really anticipate the need to be cooking on site. The orange site is a pre-function room where the staff will be for registration and administration of events and meetings. And there's also enough space there for vendors to set up booths as we have our CLE events. The area in green is the main education room. It's designed mainly for lecture style events, but it can be used for meetings if necessary. And you can see the picture on the screen right there in the middle. This is the way we anticipate seating. We liked the lecture style seating for the space, even though it gives us a little bit less space, because if we went with the theater style seating, we would be able to get more people into the space, but they would be cramped. And it doesn't look quite as good as a true lecture hall would. The tables are meant to be fixed seating and they cannot be moved and arranged once they're installed. There's a mezzanine here that you'll be able to see better in other renderings that allows us to provide additional seating to allow even more people into the event. It will also contain the same type of seating that is shown in the picture on the screen. That's the green area on the far right-hand corner. The bottom part of the room can seat up to 102 people, and the mezzanine can seat an additional 66 for a total capacity of 168, which would allow us to conduct a good portion of the CLE events that take place already, not including some of the larger, like family law, big events like that would still need to find additional space outside of the facility, but for most of the others, we would be able to accommodate. The ceiling of the first floor will be 26 feet to incorporate the mezzanine, and there's additional storage in the mezzanine area as well. The elevator bank has a regular elevator and also a service elevator. And as I mentioned, there are 2 sets of stairs and a bathroom and bathrooms that all meet current building codes on that level. Slide 2. Slide 2 is the second floor. It has 2 options that each contain conference rooms and work rooms. And we can also turn those work rooms into office spaces. And the meeting room option has 1 extra conference room than the workroom option. And we'll just need to determine which option we think will suit us better, but we have time to make the distinction between those 2 and make the selection. This floor also contains a kitchenette for caterers to use during meetings, and can also take food up to the 3rd floor meeting space from that kitchen. And there's also a large pre-function space as well. The 2nd and 3rd floor is where the cantilever is added. And you can see the rectangular shape on the right where it will be located. That space will hang over the surface lot. And we might have to eliminate 1 space on that surface lot to accommodate that design, but that's what was done to create a little more space on those floors. Okay, slide 3. The 3rd slide shows the floor plan for the 3rd floor. This will be the board meeting room where we conduct board meetings and other types of official events. And it has an outdoor reception space included in the design that will have a view to the Capitol. The wall will be made of glass that can be opened easily for the guests to walk onto the outdoor patio. The space will be open so that we can adjust the seating to accommodate the needs of each meeting. We can set it up a square or round, tops for dinner, just for receptions with no seatings, and it's estimated. And that configuration is just a reception space with no seating. We could hold up to 420 people on the 3rd floor. And so now we're going to go to the actual exterior renderings of the building from every angle so that y'all can have a good look at this. Slide, next slide. So this is what the committee has approved as a preliminary design. This slide shows a view from the west side, which is on the Lavaca Street side. And you'll notice that there's a stairwell that's encased in glass. And that's really just to add some style to the building. There's also a glass entryway on the Lavaca side that will be a pre-function space right there. See where I talked about earlier. And you can see there's a nice transition from the historic building on the left to the new building. This view, next slide. This view is from the southwest corner of the building, which also faces Lavaca. And you can see that the 1st floor is bigger than the other 2 floors because that's the floor where we have the mezzanine. You can see how tall that is there. Next slide. This view is from the east side of the building, and it shows how the cantilever will look over the surface parking lot. In the top left-hand corner of the building, you can see where the reception area will be. There's a canopy over that space to provide protection from the elements there to use the space. And you can see in the middle of the building, there are walls that will house our existing air handler vents. And those vents go all the way down to the garage, so we couldn't move them. So they designed around them. And to the right of the vents is the main entrance to the building. And we'll likely lose 1 parking space there to make room for that entrance. Next slide. This view is from the north side of the building, and this shows the historical side of the building. And you can now see how it transitions to the new building from 15th Street. And you'll notice that there's a picture of the building taken in the late 1800s in one of the outside panels, which we think is a really nice feature. And you can see the law center, where the law center is on the left. Next slide. This shows a view from the south side, which is where the chili parlor is located. On the left is a structure that houses the second staircase. At the top of the picture is a different angle of the reception space that overlooks the Capitol. You can see how the cantilever hangs over the surface parking lot there on the right. Next slide. This slide shows the Lawrence Group's proposed schedule for the project. It shows all the steps that are needed as we move forward. It contemplates beginning construction in April of 2024 and concluding in April of 2025. The schedule will have some slight adjustments from those shown on the screen. We need to build in some time there to get the approval of the Austin Historic Commission, which will take a little bit of time. But overall, the schedule depends on a number of factors. And it's just a preliminary glance of how it might progress. So now that we've seen the building, the big question is, well, how much is this going to cost? So let's go to slide 10. This is the last slide we want to leave you with to show the cost of the project. The Lawrence Group worked with a construction cost estimator to develop a detailed estimate of the potential cost of the project. This is an executive summary. We have a 34-page budget item if anybody really wants to delve into it. The items shown on the screen is a summary breakdown of most of those categories. And just we thought for discussion purposes, this would be enough. As you can see, the bottom line, the total cost of the building is estimated to be $14,246,387. But I would like to explain a little bit of what's all included in that cost. The $9.2 million covers the actual cost of the construction, supplies, equipment, furnishings, electronics, plumbing, HVAC, etc. And all those items are listed in the estimate. Also included in the total cost are the following items: general conditions, which is 15% or $1.3 million. This is a contingency amount that is added to cover additional expenses for supplies and other things that might arise that we didn't anticipate. It's a standard practice in the industry to include that type of contingency amount for unforeseen expenses, and that percentage is also standard. OH&P is estimated as $1 million. This is the fee that is paid to a contractor for the construction of the building. This estimate is listed as 10%, which is a high estimate, and contractors usually charge anywhere from 6 to 10% as their fee. When we issue an RFP to the contractors and we determine what each bidder charges and make a decision, then we'll know what that amount turns out to be, but we have plugged in the higher amounts. Design contingency is also listed at 15% or $1.7 million. This accounts for changes in the design that we made during the construction. These are for small scale changes that differ from the original design. Now, obviously, we can hold that cost down and not spend that money if we stick with our original design, which is what our intent is to get it right and get moving on it. The final estimate item is escalations up to June 2023, and that's listed as $806,000. That's a contingency to account for the increase in supplies and materials. And this amount will depend on market prices and could be less. But with each passing month and delay in the project, we have the risk of cost escalation. So that's already been built in. And so looking at this budget in another way, the total estimated cost of the construction is $10.3 million. Included on top of that are the contingency amounts totaling up to $3.9 million, which adds up to the total estimate of $14.2 million. And as I mentioned, the Lawrence Group worked with consultants to develop the estimate. And once we bring on the construction manager at risk, which remember is the delivery method that we have decided to use in order to control costs, They'll help us to firm up the cost estimate and give us more feedback on the project for a more complete estimate. And once that is done, then we implement what's called a guaranteed maximum price over the completed estimate for the construction manager. So there will be ways to look for value in the cost estimates. For example, we can look at different types of office furniture and issue an RFP for companies to bid their furniture so we can compare the prices. We can also look at the turrets that are on the building and find a solution for whether we rebuild those, which those are historic elements that we deal with, or just try to repaint them and repurpose them, which could save us quite a bit of money. The estimate that we're talking about, this is just the starting point, but we need to have a starting point in order to move forward. We will continue to look for ways to minimize costs along the way. So now that we have this cost estimate, the question then becomes, how do we pay for it? So the committee have formed a subcommittee for fundraising to start looking at conducting a capital campaign. It is our plan not to use dues from the membership to pay for this, that it will come from contributions. And we'll be asking law firms, lawyers, corporations, and legal entities that do business with us to make voluntary contributions to the building. The subcommittee is in the process of coming up with the fundraising plan that will give the bar structure about how we will conduct that fundraising. This includes the development of fundraising policies and a program that we will submit to the board in April for approval. We think it's prudent for the bar to adopt rules that will be followed in order to provide transparency for the project and to set expectations for the donors. We will also develop a recognition program for donors to find ways to thank those who donate. And there will be multiple tiers for giving. It's our intent to have ways for lawyers of all walks of the career to be able to contribute to this project. And the types of recognition that donors will receive for each type of donation will be addressed. If the board approves the plan in April, we'd like to begin fundraising shortly thereafter. But while we're working on that, our legal team is working on getting a determination from the IRS as to whether donations to the state bar are tax deductible. And we're working with tax attorney Dan Baucom to set up a meeting with the IRS to obtain a determination letter on that point. Dan is confident that we'll be able to achieve that status. We could hear something about that as early as March. Chris and Brad are working on that and can expand on that if anybody has any questions with regard to that issue. So let's just talk a little bit about next steps. So our next step will be to work with our construction lawyer, Jeff Chapman, to issue an RFP to find the construction manager at risk. And we will work with the Lawrence Group pretty soon to seek approval from the Historic Landmark Commission. We will work further to develop the fundraising plan for the board's consideration in April. We will work on a new contract with the Lawrence Group to cover the next phase of the project, which is the schematic design and development of construction documents. Beyond the pretty pictures, now to get into the brass tacks of it all. The building planning committee has worked extremely hard on this project, and we've talked about the costs and the necessary fundraising, the benefits of the new building, and how we really want to produce something our members can be proud of. We know that's a lot to process, and I'll stop here to answer any questions that you may have. I'm sure there's questions, comments.
I believe we have a question from Forrest Huddleston first. Forrest, the chair recognizes you.
Thank you so much. And can you guys hear me? I apologize. My internet connection is a little bit unstable. So can you guys just confirm for me real quick that
you're coming across loud and clear in the State Bar building.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First of all, this seems like a ton of work that has gone into this. So I applaud you guys. Thanks for your hard work on this. It's an important thing to take a look at. Second, just as somebody who has experience auditing construction companies and real estate companies and CPA perspective, I'm curious about the guaranteed maximum type of contract that we're talking about. My question would be, if there are cost overruns in excess of the contingencies that are built in, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the guaranteed maximum is kind of a lump sum type contract that if there are cost overruns, somebody would be liable for those, meaning it's not a cost reimbursable contract for every dollar for dollar cost that's been expensed. So I'm curious who that liability falls on, or if we've considered that and whether or not that would fall on the state bar. Does that question make sense?
Yes, so, and Luma can jump in and help me with this, but I also, my experience dealing with those is with, government contract jobs and construction it's called construction manager at risk for a reason. Because they help you to develop, the next phase will be that developing that guaranteed price. And they use their expertise and their connections in the community to go and gather the information about what the actual cost of what we design will be. And if they get it wrong, it eats into their guaranteed their profit margin there. So yeah, that's why it's called construction manager. And so it's a very oversimplified way of explaining it, and at the end of the day, that's kind of how it works out. But Luma, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that as well?
Yes, no, you explained it very well, but I think one of the things is they're going to be part of the design throughout the design process. They're going to be sitting with us. So there shouldn't be any big surprises there in terms of what we're designing or what we're putting in the drawings. And in fact, they're going to be very much participants in that design. And some of the systems that will be put in the project will be valued per, so we're giving you the best value for this project, and we're drawing according to that. So, and it's going to be according to their recommendations as well. So we have real market values, and that's the kind of the nice thing about it is that we have a contractor on board that will be very well informed and participant in the design decisions. So we're drawing it per their recommendations, and hopefully there wouldn't be a change, which happens a lot in a lot of projects where we draw one thing and the contractor says, but I can get this system for half of the price, and now we have to reevaluate everything and maybe redesign everything, and that's where the cost happens. You're probably saving some, but you're redesigning more. So that's where the advantages of the CM at risk is one of many. Plus, that's the contingencies. We really do want to keep contingencies, especially on a project where we have a historic building in downtown Austin with existing structure that's there that we're trying to fit in a new building in there. So I would say we need to keep the contingencies there for this project.
Director Huddleston, does that answer your question, or do you have any
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think the contingencies are certainly important. I just wanted to be sure that we had considered whether or not any overruns beyond the contingencies wouldn't directly, the state bar wouldn't directly be liable for that. And it sounds like the answer is no. So I appreciate that. Thanks for expanding on that.
I'll recognize Director Robert Toby, who has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number of questions. This is a very similar project to our building in Dallas, the Arts District Mansion, that was a historic house. And we built a pavilion adjoining it at a cost of $14 million. And that was a long time ago that it was $14 million. And that included underground parking. So a couple of questions along those lines, just in terms of the space utilization that we have in Dallas. As I understand it, the first floor is going to be fixed seating. So there's really not any flexibility in terms of configuration or anything like that for event to event. Is that right?
Yeah, the main part of the first floor in the new section is the education, the lecture hall. Yes, and that cannot be reconfigured.
Okay. So the third floor is where you've got the space that can be configured any way that the event might require, and you can put up to 425 people, I think you said.
Right. And
Okay.
the second floor has flexibility too for smaller gatherings as well. So second and third floor.
Okay. And I guess then the question becomes, because it's always an issue with us in Dallas, is parking. When you have an event, say 400 on the third floor and maybe another 150 on the second floor, and you've got meetings on the first floor, where are all these folks going to park? I mean, because that becomes an issue.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Luma expand on that too, but we still are going to retain our parking space that we have under the building for evening use. And Luma can expand and talk a little bit about what's going on. Those of us who haven't been to Austin lately haven't seen all the work that's been done around the Capitol and the new parking that exists underground. So Luma, you want to talk a little bit about how we talked about parking?
Yeah, there are several parking garages that either belong to the state or private garages. And I think part of this, and it's really, a challenge that every building downtown, any large downtown is facing. So there needs to be some kind of an agreement or arrangements for things like this, for big events, where you can use some of the after hours parking from your neighbors or the state planned parking garages that's around this. The good thing is you're next to the capital improvement project for the state, so there are several buildings being built there with new parking just next to you.
And the city will see to it that we have the appropriate, even if it's off-site parking when we go to pull our building permits, et cetera. So the city's going to prod that quite a bit when we tell them about the usable space, and so will require us to show that we have arrangements for parking elsewhere.
And Sylvia, Ray Cantu wants to address other options for parking.
Thank you. We've talked about this extensively for board meetings. We'll probably likely have board members park in our current garage now. We're working on a plan for that. But as Luma said, there are other opportunities around the Capitol that we will point people to. You may know that the hotel, before we purchased it, there was a plan to build a hotel in that spot, and the developers of the hotel did not have parking for that. So it would be people, finding different alternatives around the area to look for parking. So there's lots of spots around the Capitol here and around this area. It's just something that we'll work with constantly to get people to the right places and make sure they know where parking is. But the plan is not to add like additional parking spots because we just don't have that space.
Thank you very much. Director Toby, does that answer your question?
It does. I have one other question.
All right.
And so we had the generosity of a lot of firms when we built our pavilion back in 20 plus years ago and raised over $14 million to do it. The dynamics of firms, I think, have changed in the ensuing 20 years, and I'm concerned that raising $14 million today will be harder than it was 20 something years ago. Is there a contingency to fund the construction, assuming that the fundraising goals aren't met?
Well, I mean, we did take that, we talked about that and took that into account. And I have to tell you that we thought if Dallas could raise 14 million in just Dallas, that certainly across the great state of Texas with law firms all over the state, we should be able to meet that goal. But I'm actually very optimistic. And we have limitations because unlike the local bar in Dallas, we can't borrow money. So if this looks like it's not going to be financed, we've got to come up with plan B, which is going to be much disappointing because it won't be anywhere near the kind of facility that we're envisioning right now. We'd be back to just the footprint of what's there and bringing that up to code and really a small meeting space added. We'd like to think that we can do it. We've spoken to people already, and maybe the staff has some wants to weigh in a little bit about that because they have done that. We have briefly talked about the fact that since we've got some historic preservation going on there, there may even be grant money available for at least facade improvements, et cetera. So we're just starting down that path. But we're feeling optimistic that it can be done. I don't know if Trey or anybody from the staff wants to talk a little bit about what they've done in anticipation, the people they've spoken to about potential fundraising.
Before Ray comes up, I'll mention that, we have almost 20% of our bar is lawyers over 65. And I'm hopeful that there are enough lawyers in the state of Texas that know how beneficial their career and their profession was to them in earning money, and perhaps are in a point in time in their life where they'd like to leave, a dedication to that, to our building. But as Sylvia says, we've got to start the process to try. And if we can't raise the money, we'll have to revisit our plan, but we won't commit to engage in any activity until we lock the money in. Ray Cantu, would you like to address fundraising?
And what Laura said is really it. As we go, if we, see that there's problems with raising that kind of money, then we will pivot along the way to come up with alternative solutions. Sylvia mentioned earlier, we are planning on a robust type of fundraising program where we're approaching firms and making availability for individual lawyers to donate, and corporations and things like that. So we're going to have a fairly robust plan for that. And then also, as we go along in the schedule that Sylvia showed earlier, that was the schedule that we got from Lua and her group. And as you can see, we have some amount of time for which to fundraise. So, there's steps along the way that have to be done, going to the historical commission, doing the construction documents and things like that. So there's kind of like naturally a built-in amount of time to give us that time to raise funds. And if we're seeing that we're having problems as we go through that schedule, then, we can pivot and reconsider alternatives.
Thank you.
Director Toby, are your questions answered?
They are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll call on Director Kenan Wooten.
Thank you, President Gibson. Just a few suggestions. One stems from work we did at my law firm a few years ago when designing the space here. And in that one slide, I think it was slide 2, where there's a decision to be made about whether to have an area be a workspace or a meeting area. One thing we did is create a divider that can be put into a room space and taken out so that it can function as both. Maybe that's an option, not to have to choose between the two. Another suggestion, if it hasn't been done already, is maybe to get the input of leaders from the Disability Issues Committee of the State Bar of Texas in terms of accessibility. I know there's probably all the ADA compliant issues being taken into account, but sometimes there's more than that can be simple to implement and make a big difference. So just a suggestion. And then final suggestion, which is probably nothing you all haven't thought of already, but when we were in the stages with the Austin Bar Association of fundraising for the Hilgers House purchase, one of the things that we did that we thought was effective was helping people to understand the benefit to them of the space when asking for money from them for the space. With that, I'll conclude.
Thank you very much. Director Cardenas, I saw at one point your hand was up, but it looks like it's down. Has your question been answered?
Yes, Madam President. I had the same concern or question that Director Toby had about the parking. And but I noted that one of the answers was that to work with after-hour parking, but I think we have to consider the during hours parking, during business hours as well, obviously. And as Madam Past President noted, that I'm sure the city is going to require that. And then just another note on fundraising. I divided 14 million by, I think we have 110,000 lawyers. So that's about $127 per lawyer. So I think we can get that money raised. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other questions, comments, or concerns from any director? All right.
Y'all liked, does it look good to y'all? Because the committee went over and over and made adjustments to colors and windows and different things. So we're happy to hear that y'all are liking it.
I think it's absolutely fabulous and would really be a great resource for our members.
Laura, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make the motion in a second, but I kind of want to explain what the motion will entail.
Okay.
So on behalf of the committee, I'm going to be asking the board to approve the conceptual building design and the conceptual design estimate. And we want everyone to understand that this is not the final cost estimate and that the design may still change as we get input from the construction manager down the road. As Luma said, they oftentimes bring cost savings when you sit with them, or they will tell you about something being impractical and you should adjust it this way or the other. So you might see some adjustments. The board will have opportunity to discuss and approve the final cost estimate once it's complete, which we think will be in either September or January. So we're not approving the final spend today. What we're voting on is the conceptual design and its accompanying conceptual estimate so that we can move the project forward and if that's what the board wishes to do, but it gives us a good starting place to go out there. So on behalf of the building planning special committee, I make a motion to approve the conceptual building design and conceptual design estimate as presented today.
Any director who desires to second the motion, please state your name and make your motion.
Calvillo, second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the conceptual design and the conceptual cost estimate signify by saying aye.
AI.
AEIOU. Any opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries. That takes us to agenda item 9, the executive committee presentation on nominations and elections subcommittee. I understand that Director Vargas will be making that report.
I will. Thank you, Madam President. Our report is going to be brief. To start off with, as you know, in September of last year, the board selected candidates to run for State Bar President-elect. And those two candidates are Jerry Alexander of Dallas and Steve Benish of Austin. We aren't aware of any petition candidates this year. The two candidates that the board selected, however, have been great ambassadors for the State Bar and have both been campaigning really, really hard around the entire state. They've been doing just a tremendous job. This spring, the bar is going to send out various communications to help get the word out about the campaigns and the election. We'll be publishing information in the Bar Journal, on our website, and emails that we will send to members, and we'll be posting information on social media. We'll also be creating 1-minute videos about the candidates that we'll post online for our members to see. And the bar will also conduct 2 candidate forums for the president-elect race. They're tentatively scheduled for March 10th and April 4th. Rocky Deere is going to moderate the first forum. Rocky's the moderator on the State Bar podcast and does an amazing job. And then immediate past president Sylvia Barunda Firth and I will be moderating the second forum, which will be broadcast from the Law Center. We're going to be sending out more information on both candidate forums soon. In addition to the president-elect race, there are 10 district director positions that are open for election again this year. The chart of those open positions is included in your meeting materials for this meeting. And we have information posted about how to run for director on the Board of Directors webpage. If you know of anyone that's interested in running for these positions, please direct them to the website where they can get the petition form and other documents that are necessary to mount a campaign to run. The deadline to submit petitions to run is March 1st. And you can also have potential candidates contact Ray Cantu directly, and he can help get them situated in order to run in the upcoming election. The election will begin on April 3rd and will end on May 2nd. And we ask our directors to please encourage all of their constituents and in their districts to vote in these important elections. It's important for the State Bar to have a large amount of participation in these elections, and it's just good for the process. And that's all I have. With that, Madam President, that concludes the report of the Nominations and Elections Subcommittee.
Thank you, Director Vargas. Are there any comments from directors for Director Vargas or Director or Immediate past President Firth. Well, I will say, don't just respond to people who ask about it, but proactively encourage people to consider running. My experience is that people think that if somebody doesn't mention it to them, that there's an implicit belief that they're not qualified. So, shout it out to everybody in your district that these are openings available, and that we encourage anyone who has an interest to submit a petition and run for a director position. So we'll move on to 9B, and that's the Policy Manual Subcommittee that Director Kenan Wooten will report. But let me assure you that after she's finished, we are going to take a brief bathroom break. So hang with us for the one more report, and we'll take a short break. So Director Wooten, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Gibson. So to all of you, the Policy Manual Subcommittee met in December of 2022 and recommended unanimously 2 sets of changes to the board policy manual that I'm going to walk through today. And these proposed changes are in your meeting notebook starting on page 27 of the PDF in redline form. So the first set of proposed changes involves section 3.08.02 of the policy manual, and that deals with the publication of the application process for the Client Security Fund. As many of you know, but for background purposes for others, this is the state bar fund that allows for discretionary grants to clients who have been harmed by their lawyers' dishonest conduct. And by policy, this fund is administered by the Office of Chief Disciplinary Counsel, or CDC, along with the Client Security Fund Subcommittee. So this set of proposed changes that you see here was prompted by the Grievance Oversight Committee's 2022 biennial report. As some of you may recall, in that report, there was a recommendation to amend this particular provision that's on the screen now, which requires the CDC to publish the rules and procedures governing the Client Security Fund, along with application and brochures, forms as well. So the current language in the policy manual states the CDC shall publish this material, quote, to the chair of each grievance committee. That's the language you see struck on the screen there. The GOC pointed out in its report that this is not the process that's currently followed, and that leaving the provision in the policy manual as is could put the grievance committee chair in the awkward position of having to educate a complainant before them about the Client Security Fund process and giving the impression that a decision has been made in the matter at the time of the hearing at hand. So the GOC recommended amending this particular provision to require including information and brochures to be sent to complainants in the grievance process. What you see before you essentially as amended, proposed amendments essentially codifies the CDC's current practice. The changes proposed remove the reference to the grievance committee chair and add a requirement that the CDC provide an application form and brochure to each person in the grievance process who appears to be eligible for a grant from the fund. Once again, this does track current practices. In other words, we don't anticipate that if these changes are made, they're going to increase the burden or cost for the CDC. As a final but important note, I'll convey that the Policy Manual Subcommittee received invaluable input from CDC Shauna Willing in drafting and reviewing this particular proposal. So with that summary, I'll go ahead on behalf of the Policy Manual Subcommittee and move that the Executive Committee approve the proposed changes to Board Policy Manual subsection 3.08.02 as included in the meeting materials for today and presented on the screen right now.
Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Is there any discussion regarding the proposal? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against signify by saying nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, President Gibson. The next set of proposed changes begin on page 28 of the PDF. And these deal with subsection 8.01.10. This particular section of the policy manual addresses state bar sections serving as a resource for a governmental body, which can include but isn't limited to the Texas legislature. We worked closely with Kaylin Laney, Christina McGuire, and the bar's legal team in drafting and reviewing the proposed changes that are before you today. And just to emphasize again, this particular provision is about State Bar section serving as a resource. There's a different section dealing with sections that are advising on legislation. The current language in the policy manual only requires a section to notify State Bar staff within 10 business days of being designated as a resource. The proposed changes that you see on the screen would instead require the section to notify the executive director or his or her designee before serving as a resource. We think that's an important and significant change to process. I want to point out that subsection C2 already gives the executive director the ability to instruct a section not to serve as a resource if it's contrary to the best interests of the State Bar, if it conflicts with State Bar policy, or if it's not within the section's area of expertise. But with the proposed changes, the executive director would actually have that advance notice of potential resource capacity, and we think that would make this particular policy manual provision a more effective way to proceed moving forward. The proposed language that's before you today also provides that to the extent possible, the required information from the section serving as a resource should be provided in writing. The policy manual subcommittee suggested this language, recognizing that written notice is of course preferred whenever possible, but there are practical realities, things moving quickly in the session that may preclude that advanced written notice. So it's drafted to account for the possibility that you just have to proceed with verbal notice as opposed to written. Finally, we cleaned up the language in the proposed amendments here to make it clear that the section is not providing advice and counsel, but instead is providing information. We think that's more accurate in light of the fact that this particular provision, again, is addressing State Bar section serving as a resource. Finally, in subpart C3 at the bottom of the screen there, we corrected a reference about a disclaimer. The proposal puts forward in what we believe is plain terms what a section needs to indicate whenever serving as a resource. Overall, these changes that are suggested are intended to streamline the process of serving as a resource and better protect the State Bar's interests in that process. With that summary being provided on behalf of the Policy Manual Subcommittee, I move that the Executive Committee approve the proposed changes to Board Policy Manual subsection 8.01.10 as included in the meeting materials for today's meeting.
Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the policy manual change?
I believe President Gibson.
I'm sorry.
I have my hand raised, and it says I have my hand raised, but I don't see it. I'm sorry. I have a question, Kenan. And it's with regard to the government law section in particular. The government law section is made up of people that work for local governments and they are frequently called as resource witnesses, not necessarily because of the section, but because of what they do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that this makes it, I mean, I get it if we're responding as a member of the section, but like, for instance, me as a city attorney, and I'm called as a resource witness to testify with regard to a bill that's going to affect cities. And I happen to be a member of the government law section. Oh, and that's not true right now, but in past days was, and the government law council. Is there enough distinction? I mean, clearly that's not what you intend, right? I mean,
correct. I at least from my perspective in looking at these, the concept was to address sections of the State Bar serving as a resource. Obviously, you're going to have an individual or more than one individual who's the voice, but I think it's specifically directed toward the section itself serving as a resource as opposed to individuals in their individual capacity. But I do want to hear from Kaylin Laney if she's with us, because she's the one who knows the most about the history of this provision.
Yes. Executive Director Apfel will speak to this issue. Kaylin. Or Kaylin, are you available, Kaylin? We can't tell from the Zoom screen right now.
Long time, Sylvia. Oh, okay, sorry.
Go ahead and proceed, Kaylin.
Go ahead, Brad.
Brad will address it. Caitlin Laney is frozen on the Zoom screen.
I was just going to add that I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a great question. I agree with Kenan. That provision is written in terms of the section serving as a resource, and obviously there's going to be a representative there on behalf of the section. But I don't think it's intended or would ever be read to imply that just because someone happens to also be a section, that if they're at the legislature serving as a resource in some other capacity, that this would limit them. I think it's only when they're there acting on behalf of, the section as a section of the state bar.
And it's been a while since I've gone to a hearing and looked at the form that's provided to individuals who serve as resources or in other capacities, but is there a space on that form typically to indicate whether you're there in an individual capacity as opposed to on behalf of any entity?
If Caitlin's joining, she may be able to chime in, but that's my recollection from the last time I was there, that that you do have to indicate who you're appearing on behalf of. And that would be where, if you're, appearing on behalf of the section, that you would disclose that there.
Brad, that's correct. And I think my camera is what makes me unstable. So hopefully this works. Yes, and it's been in that's a section of the policy that's been there a long time. And there's a handful of sections that get asked to be a resource. And we're just cleaning up the section. It's not changing anything about what they would do in their personal or professional capacity, just what they're doing in the name of the section.
Thank you. I just wanted that clarified because I could see that quickly becoming a question because everybody's going to be real sensitive to it in this session, especially.
Did I miss any other questions or comments of any other director? As I say, in my cousin Busy, I need to get some thicker glasses. Thank you. All right. So all those in favor of proposing subsection 8.01.10 of the policy manual change signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. The motion carries. It is 11:36. Let's take a recess until 11:48. Stand recessed. All right, we're back on the record at 11:48. We are now on Executive Committee Agenda Item 10, the report from the Audit and Finance Committee, and I'll recognize Director David Cavillo. Director Cavillo, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. What a historic day when we get a chance to preview a new building. My only comment on that is I think it needs a little bit more burnt orange in it, but that's neither here nor there. So it's my privilege to present on behalf of the Audit and Finance Committee three things. One is a review of the first 6 months of the fiscal year. The second is sort of the preliminary results of the internal audit, and then the second is the results of the financial audit for the fiscal year ending May 31st, 2022. So for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, revenues exceeded expenditures for our general fund. That's always a good thing. We exceeded our budgeted projections by about $2.6 million. The reason for that is well, many reasons for that. One is that we did that budget a couple of years ago when we were in the midst of the pandemic, and we had to be conservative in how we budgeted. And so things have turned out even better than we expected. So that's why our actual revenues exceeded our budgeted revenues to that degree. In particular, we focus on Texas Bar CLE and MCLE. That's where most of the positive variances have come from. They've done a good job of holding expenses down, as you'd expect, and less travel, etc. But they've also done well because there are fewer in-person video replays, and they've also done a good job of negotiating with the hotels to reduce the cost relating to attrition fees, which happens when targets for targeted rooms don't get met. So that has inured to our budgetary benefit. Also, the advertising strategy for Texas Bar CLE has changed from printed brochures to e-brochures, and that's always a good thing. Less impact on the Amazon. The second thing is with respect to the internal audit. You may recall we have an internal audit and we have an external financial audit. The internal audit, the Audit and Finance Committee selected the firm of McConnell and Jones to undertake a review and craft a plan for us in reviewing the State Bar's operations in accordance with standards. And they completed that risk assessment in accordance with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants Statement of Auditing Standards. And they have a proposal that they're going to present to the Audit and Finance Committee next week. Their 5-year plan will be something that we'll review, and we'll present it to the board at the board meeting in January. The third thing is the financial audit. Again, we have the external audit that reviews the financial statements and make sure that they're being presented to the public, and as they're presented fairly and accurately, or somewhat accurately. And so we've gotten a clean opinion in common parlance, or an unmodified opinion in auditing parlance. Unmodified opinion is what you want. It's the clean. That's a good thing. Now, as part of that review, that audit by the Weaver firm, remember we had McConnell and Jones as the internal firm. This is the Weaver firm. The Weaver firm also provides an internal control letter. So we're getting two for the price of one. We're getting their review of the financial statements, and they opine on that. But they also give us an internal control letter, which is kind of another layer of review over the internal operations, similar to what the McConnell and Jones does. It's not overlap, but it's just another perspective, another look. And that internal control letter, which is required by professional standards, did note 3 areas of improvement in their internal control letter, and that's included in your packet. There are 3 things that were not classified as significant, but there are areas that I'm sure I'm sure management wants to look at in time by the time we get to our next meeting. And they have to do with the reconciling of one particular division's investment account. They have to do with making sure banking deposits stay below a minimum level to ensure that they're federally insured. And then the accounts receivable got a little high in the Texas bar books now that they're flapping their entrepreneurial wings and getting a little high. So it's good. It's good control to have yet another group review that. I think we can rest assured that because we're having the McConnell Jones firm and we have the Weaver firm looking at our internal controls, that we're following best practices. So again, we'll get back to the board, the full board, at the January 27th meeting and talk about these points, and maybe we'll keep our eye in particular on these 3 areas of improvement. We want nothing but an A+ every time. So that concludes my report, but I'll be happy to answer any questions, especially with Tracy's help if she's in the room.
Thank you, Director Cavilla. Are there any comments or questions regarding the report from the Audit and Finance Committee? If so, please raise your hand on Zoom. Seeing none, we'll move to agenda item 11, the Discipline and Client Attorney Assistance, or DCAP Subcommittee, and I'll recognize Director Robert Tobey for his presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 items for you today for consideration. Before I get to those, I want to describe the process that resulted in us bringing these action items to the Executive Committee today. And basically, they are amendments or really additions primarily to Rule 1.00 of the disciplinary rules, and a rewrite of Rule 1.09 and a brand new Rule 1.10. Those come to the DCAP committee from the Committee on Disciplinary Rules and Referenda, or the CDRR for short. Their job is to study recommendations for rule improvements or amendments to the disciplinary rules and the disciplinary rules of procedure. And they brought those 3 rules to our committee, the DCAP committee, for study. We have been looking at them for the past month. The committee then approved the proposed rule changes on January 5th, just last week. And so they are ready for me to present to you today. The first one is Rule 1.00. That's the definitional rules. There are proposed new definitions of confirmed in writing, informed consent, represent, represents, or representation, screened, which is an important area in connection with rules 1.09 and 1.10, and written or writing. Those are the new rules. There's also a clarification of the definitions of fraud or fraudulent by adding the word negligent in the sentence describing them. So I'm going to take each proposed rule separately. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to present them, but these are important rule changes to define what it is that lawyers are supposed to do when dealing with potential conflicts, and that is getting matters confirmed in writing, have informed consent, and then screening is going to be an important part of these rules if they are adopted by the bar. So I'll open it up to any questions related to Rule 1.00.
Are there any questions of Director Tobey with regard to the proposed change to Rule 1.0 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct? If so, please raise your hand on Zoom.
Seeing none, I will move on behalf of the DCAP committee for approval of the amendments to Rule 1.00.
Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Is there any discussion?
Hearing none, I would ask for all those in favor to say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
All of
opposed?
those opposed say nay. There are no nays. The motion carries. Director Tobey, I'll ask you to present your next proposed amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I won't step on your toes next time.
That's okay.
The next is Rule 1.09. There is an existing Rule 1.09 dealing with conflicts with lawyers and former clients. 1.09 that's proposed is a rewrite of that rule, and frankly, I think makes it a lot clearer in terms of what the duties and responsibilities are of the particular lawyer involved. It is based on ABA Model Rule 1.09, and frankly, I do think it is a good clarification and really enables lawyers to move firms in a much easier way and avoiding those sorts of disqualifying conflicts that are out there under the existing Rule 1.09. So again, I would entertain any questions related to that proposed rule.
Are there any questions for Director Toby about the proposed amendment to Rule 1.09 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct? If so, raise your hand. Seeing none, do you have a motion?
I see Director Covilla raised his hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. I
No,
was not able to find it in the PDF. I downloaded the PDF and I didn't find that section. Do you have that reference by any chance, Director Toby?
Yes, let me find it for you. Starts at page 150.
150.
150.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. It would have taken me
Yes.
another minute to find it on my screen.
There it is. There it is.
And there is one of the things that Director Wooten asked for in the committee level, and we and Ray Cantu provided, was a side-by-side comparison between the old Rule 109 and the new Rule 109. And again, it's a complete rewrite. So you're reading the old rule, then you're reading the new rule. You won't see any overlap.
Okay.
What these rules are designed to do, just to encompass this rule and Rule 1.10, are basically making it easier for lawyers to change firms and not have the sorts of disqualifying conflicts that we've had in the past. And up to now, when a lawyer changes firms and has a conflict with a client in the new firm, there is an irrebuttable presumption under the case law that the lawyer has shared client confidences that create a disqualifying conflict, not only of the lawyer himself or herself, but of the entire firm.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine in big firms like you're a member of a relatively large firm, those sorts of disqualifying conflicts can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And the idea here with these two rules is to enable that lawyer to be screened off from the process so that the lawyer's potential conflicts are basically screened away from the other lawyers and they can continue to handle matters.
And this conforms us to the ABA model rule.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is modeled off of the ABA model rule 1.09.
Okay.
any other questions for Director Toby?
Director Wooten has a question.
And it's really just a tack-on comment to Director Toby's excellent explanation, and that is the added benefit of making the Texas rules comparable to the ABA model rules in this context is that in federal cases, sometimes when assessing disqualification, the courts will try to harmonize the ABA model rules and the Texas rules. And that can be kind of thorny in light of the differences now, but this will make it easier and the standards clearer for, in particular, those lawyers who are practicing both state and federal court and federal court as confronting disqualification considerations.
That's an excellent point.
Thank you very much, Director Wooten. Any other comments or observations? All
Director
right.
Ritter.
Director Ritter, please, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to tack on to this to say that from a young lawyer's perspective and an ability to be able to transition jobs, this is super helpful. And in addition to, employers, law firms being able to recruit the right amount of talent, especially in smaller areas, will be super helpful. So I appreciate the hard work, Director Toby.
Well, most of the hard work was by the CDRR, but I think these are good changes.
Any other comments before we put this to a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the proposed amendment to Rule 109 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? Seeing none, the motion carries. And the next rule, Director Toby, would you present it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rule 1.10, I'll keep the presentation very short. This is a new rule under Texas disciplinary procedure. It is modeled on ABA Rule 1.10, and it deals with the imputation of conflicts of an individual lawyer moving over to a firm to all of the other lawyers in the firm, and allows screening processes to be put into effect so that whatever conflict that the new lawyer has are not imputed to all the other members of the firm. And again, it's modeled on a desire to allow lawyer movement to become much easier and without the disqualifying conflicts that can prevent firms from continuing to represent certain clients. So again, I'll throw that open to questions if anyone has any additional questions to what we've already talked about.
Any questions with regard to proposed new rule 1.10 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct?
Seeing none,
do you have a motion on behalf of?
I do. On behalf of the DCAP committee, I move the executive committee to approve proposed new rule 1.10.
Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of proposed rule 1.10 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? The motion carries. Anything further?
That concludes our report from the DCAP committee, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Director Toby. Yeah, I don't think, Director Toby, that on 1.09, I think you took the discussion before you made your motion. So do I have a motion on behalf of the DCAP committee to approve the amendment of Rule 1.09?
Let me formally move on behalf of the DCAP committee for approval by the executive committee of Rule 1.09 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct.
Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Let's take a revote on that. All in favor of the proposed change to Rule 1.09 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion carries. That takes us to item 12 on the agenda. I understand that our chair, Chad Baruch, is presenting in lieu of Todd Smith, who I think is crying over the game last night. But TCU made us proud. The state of Texas is very proud of TCU. Director.
I'll need a moment for rebuttal. Yes, I will be pinch hitting for Director Smith as he is on a flight on his way back from the football game. And I'll try to make this brief. We've got 4 proposed rule changes here. The Administration Committee received proposed amendments to the Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure and the Rules of Civil Procedure from the State Bar Court Rules Committee. So we'll have 2 from them. And then also received proposed amendments to the Texas Rules of Evidence from the State Bar Administration of Rules of Evidence Committee, and we'll have 2 from them. All of them, by the way, I think are fairly straightforward and probably won't engender a great deal of discussion, I wouldn't anticipate. We can decide today whether to approve the referral of the proposed amendments to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration. Of course, the board, obviously the full board, would need to do so as well later this month in Bryan. Assuming the board approves these referrals, there still would be opportunity for review by the Supreme Court and its Supreme Court Advisory Committee before any change actually would potentially occur. Ultimately, it would be up to the Supreme Court whether to adopt the changes. And if the court did consider the changes, there would be an opportunity for public comments as well. The proposed changes submitted both by the Court Rules Committee and AREC are included in the public meeting materials for today. I think we have some folks from the Court Rules Committee on standby and appreciate them being here just in case we need them to answer any questions. The first proposal is Texas Rule of Appellate Procedure 52.9. This is a very, very simple rule change. This is simply to clarify that the same rules governing motions for rehearing and extensions of time for motions for rehearing in direct appeals apply in original proceedings. So a little bit of a lack of clarity in the rules. So just whatever the rule just says, whatever the rules are for filing a motion for rehearing and for getting extensions of time to do that, whatever the rule is in a direct appeal, the same rule applies in a mandamus or a habeas proceeding or whatever your original proceeding may be. That's the first rule. It could not be any simpler. The administration committee met in December and voted in favor of referral of this amendment and all the others to the Supreme Court for consideration. So on behalf of the executive committee, I move that the court approve the referral of the proposed amendment to TRAP 52.9 to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
We need a second to approve the referral of the State Bar Court Rules Committee's proposed amendments to the Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure 52.9. Any director who wishes to second that motion, please state your name and make your motion.
I'll second it. Lucy Forbes.
Director Forbes from Houston seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amendment to proposed rule or the proposed amendment to Rule 52.9 signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Baruch.
Thank you, President Gibson. The second item, also from the Court Rules Committee, concerns Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 226A and specifically jury instructions. In the materials submitted by the committee, you can see the proposed amendments on pages 12, 14, 15, and 16. And there's an explanation starting on page 22. There are some folks on this executive committee who probably can address this in far greater detail and with far more knowledge than I, but I'll do my best. This is, by the way, sort of what I'll call a remand to the Supreme Court Advisory Committee. This has gone to them once. They had some comments and suggestions and asked for some changes. It went back to the Court Rules Committee. So this has been up the ladder once already. This is sort of, I think, we're close to the culmination of a very lengthy process, adding an implicit bias instruction to our jury instructions. That's obviously happening in jurisdictions all across the country. Although I think we here in Texas have been one of the states on the forefront of that movement, and certainly Dallas County Judge Tanya Parker has been very active in this effort. It also is with the encouragement, of course, of the American Bar Association, which has strongly suggested that jurisdictions look at this. And so after a great deal of discussion, and as I said, one trip to SCAC already, the language finally is in what the Court Rules Committee believes to be final form and ready to go back to SCAC and ready for the court's review. And there also has been, support from the Supreme Court for this in principle as well. So with that, again, the Administration Committee voted in December to approve the referral. And so I move that the Executive Committee approve the referral of the Court Rules Committee's proposed amendments to Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 226A to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
This motion needs a second. Any director who wishes to second the motion, please state your name and then your motion.
Robert Tobey. Second.
Second comes from Director Tobey. Any discussion about this proposed amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Any opposed, please vote nay. The ayes have it. Chair Baruch, I'll turn it back over to you for the next discussion.
Thank you. That concludes the Court Rules Committee's proposals. Now we'll talk about the evidence proposals. And the first one deals with Rule of Evidence 509. This is the privilege rule concerning occupational licensing investigations and proceedings brought by the Texas Medical Board. And all this rule change is designed to do is to clarify that any privileges associated with those types of medical board proceedings are defined by the legislature. In other words, they're governed by the statutes, not by the rules of evidence. And there was some confusion about that under the former version of the rule. And so this rule change is simply designed to clarify for everyone that whatever the extent of that privilege may be is up to the legislature. It's going to be defined by the governing statutes rather than by the rules of evidence. So that's really the only change being made to this proposed, under this proposal. The administration committee voted in favor of referral, and I move that the executive committee approve the referral of the proposed amendment to Texas Rule of Evidence 509 to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
This motion requires a second. Any director wishing to second the motion to approve the rules of evidence amendment to Rule 509, please indicate your name and make your motion.
Robert Toby, I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of referring the Rules of Evidence Committee's proposed amendment to Texas Rule of Evidence 509. Chair Baruch, do you have a question? I see your hand.
No, I was just voting yes. I jumped the gun though. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Everyone on our firm is stepping on your toes today, President Gibson. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I hope it's not a new trend in 2023. All those in favor of approving the referral of the Rules of Evidence Committee's amendment to Texas Rule of Evidence 509 to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? The motion carries. Your last proposed rule, Chair Baruch.
Yes, thank you. Texas Rule of Evidence 510. This is another privilege, the mental health information privilege. Some of you may know Director Tolshin and some other members of our board have been fairly active in pursuing this for the past couple of years. It's got broader applicability than this, but it's really directed largely at our TLAP program, and it's intended to clarify that the privilege extends to persons acting as an employee, member, or agent of an approved peer assistance program under Chapter 467 of the Texas Health and Safety Code. So that to clarify that communications with counselors at TLAP and things like that would fall under the privilege for mental health information. The committee voted to approve. I therefore move that the executive committee approve the referral of the proposed amendment to Texas Rule of Evidence 510 to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
Any director who wishes to second the motion to refer the proposed amendment to Texas Rule of Evidence 510, please indicate by saying your name and your motion.
Director Wooten, I second the motion.
Director Wooten has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion about the referral of proposed amendment to the Texas Rules of Evidence 510? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the referral, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries. Is there any further business?
No, that is the conclusion of my pinch hitting. I'm going back to the dugout.
Thank you very much, Chair Baruch. We are now to agenda item number 13, the report from the ad hoc committee to select an at-large directors. I'll call on Chair Kelly Ann Clark.
Good afternoon, everyone. There are 4 at-large director positions on the State Bar Board. I'm happy to be the chair of the committee this year. At the annual meeting next June, David Calvillo's term will expire, and we will all be very sad for that. However, we are looking and on the hunt for a new, it won't be David Calvillo, but it will be someone that hopefully will be able to fill his space. There is a process that we have in the board policy to fill the position, and I am privileged to serve as the chair of the ad hoc committee to select at-large members. Our committee looks forward to taking on this important task. The other members of the committee include Elizabeth Cantu, Laura Pratt, Paul Stafford, and Kimberly Pack-Wilson. December 1st was the deadline to submit the nominations to the State Bar. This year, there were 9 nominations that we received for consideration, which I'll let you know is very similar to last year when we had 2 positions available and we had 10 nominations. So I'm very happy to report that people, the members of our state bar, were incredibly excited about being part of our board as a at-large member. It's obviously a competitive process since there are 9 people for 1 position, and all of our nominees were qualified. And it's going to be a tough decision. All of the nominees are extraordinary, and they're from all over the state and have different practice areas and unique experiences. The committee anticipates submitting very strong nominees to President Gibson for her consideration. On our meeting on January 5th, the ad hoc committee reviewed these nominations and determined that we would interview all of the nominees. So on the 9th of February, we have 9 interviews to conduct. They all had exceptional experience, and we thought it was appropriate to interview all of them to give them all a fair opportunity at this position. We will recommend 2 nominees as part of the process to President Gibson for her consideration. And of those 2, President Gibson will choose 1 nominee and submit the appointment to the board for consideration at the April board meeting. That concludes my report, and I look forward to letting you, sharing with President Gibson our 2 nominees from our committee. Thank you.
Thank you for that hard work. I'm glad to see there's such a great interest in lawyers across the state wanting to serve in that position of at-large director. So thank you. That takes us to agenda item 14, which is the report from the section representatives to the board. I'll call on Michael Smith, who I understand is joining us from the great city of Waco today.
I am. I'm in class at Baylor Law School this week in their LLM program, and so far today we've had a fire drill, a laptop blow up. So it's been a fun morning. I just have one item for the executive committee today from the section reps committee. It's a small housekeeping matter, but I wanted to update everyone on what we're recommending. We have received a request from the Justice of the Peace Court section to change their name from the JP Court section to the Justice Court section. They'd like for the board to consider that at the board's January meeting so the change can be reflected on the upcoming dues statement. Per board policy, our section reps committee is charged with vetting any proposed section name change and then providing recommendation to the executive committee. So that's what I'm doing now. We have a 4-part test for a request like this. We look to see if the change is well advised and reasonable. Would it cause any negative consequences? Would it change or expand the jurisdiction of the section? And would it cause the section to overlap with the jurisdiction of another section? Now, the reason we've been given for the change is that as those that practice in these courts know, the 500 series of rules and the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure were adopted by the Supreme Court in 2013, and they refer to justice courts throughout. The Supreme Court also regularly refers to the Texas justice courts in their writings. So the idea is to change the name to reflect to what it's called in rules and in writings. So what have we done to look into this? The section circulated this for comment to their members, and the change was approved by a vote of their at-large members of the section during their annual meeting last summer. We then circulated it to all section chairs by email for comment, no negative reports there. The chair of the section currently appeared at the Council of Chairs meeting, presented it to the section chairs, no negative comments. In a burst of caution, we reached out directly to the judicial section to ask if they had a concern with this, and they did not. So as a result, the section reps committee voted unanimously to support the section name being changed to the Justice Court section. Before I open it up to questions, I'll just tell you, we will recommend that this name change be approved by the board at the meeting later this month, and we'll ask to put it on the consent agenda so that it'll pass if there are no objections. Are there any questions or about this request?
Any questions for Director Smith regarding the proposed name change from the JP section to the Justice section? I see Kenan Wooten, Director Wooten has her hand up.
I would just add to everything you've already said. I checked the government code just now and justice courts is there.
Thank you.
We're
Thank you.
consistent with statute as well.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you for your report and get back to school. You're missing class.
Okay, that's all I have, Madam President. Thank you very much.
That takes us to TYLA President Michael Ritter, who's going to give his report on behalf of the Texas Young Lawyers Association.
Thank you, President Gibson, and good afternoon, everyone. To manage expectations, my report won't be too brief or too long. It'll be a report of a perfectly average length of time. Since our last meeting, the Texas Young Lawyers Association has been very hard at work, and I'm happy to share with everyone this afternoon not only my activities, but also the activities of our board of directors in completing this year's projects, programs, and resources. On September 22nd to the 24th, I assisted in hosting the 20 Leadership SBOT participants in Austin, Texas. Leadership SBOT is the state bar program designed to increase the participation of diverse leaders in the state bar, and this was the very first meeting of the class this year. They engaged in team building activities, heard presentations from Judge Karen Crump, Justice Jeffrey Boyd, yours truly, and a panel of state bar volunteers on past leaderships and the values of getting involved in leadership in the state bar. We also participated in a community service toy drive for the children served by the Texas Baptist Children's Home in my own hometown of Round Rock, Texas. On November 2nd through the 4th, I also attended, along with President Gibson and Karen Chevins, the Texas Minority Council program in Dallas, Texas, where TYLA's chair and past president, Brittany Harrison, presented on ways that attorneys could use TYLA and other state bar resources to serve underserved communities and establishing meaningful connections to those communities to improve the quality of service to underrepresented communities. Also on November 14th, I had the privilege of helping to welcome the newest members of the state bar and TYLA at the induction ceremony in Austin at the Bass Concert Hall. I was excited to share with them the benefits of service and networking through local bar associations and the programs and services offered by the TYLA. On pages 367 and 68 of the meeting packet, you'll see my bar journal columns. I've shared with the readership my encouragement to find hobbies and enjoyable activities outside the practice of law, such as learning how to do a famous dance. I shared my trials and tribulations of my relationship with my family and encouraged others to make time and effort for their families over the holidays. And in my most recent column, I cautioned attorneys about being flexible with their career goals and sharing some of my own experiences about how I thought there was only one way to approach what I wanted to accomplish, but really gaining a better perspective about how to accomplish those goals through connecting with other attorneys. So enough about me. The main highlight of this report is the hard work and the project completion by the TYLA Board of Directors to fulfill our mission of serving our membership and serving the public. We've completed a new directors packet, which is a board governance resource for the board. Previously, it had been an informal process, but now we have a more comprehensive orientation packet so that our board members on TYLA can be more informed about what we do and our relationship with the State Bar of Texas and how to better collaborate. We've also established a YouTube account and started the process of transitioning our video resources from our various websites to YouTube to make them more accessible and shareable, not only for our past projects, but our future projects as well. For membership services, after 4 years of inactivity, we finally have our quarterly newsletter back to keep our membership informed about what TYLA is doing and about opportunities for them within the state bar. We completed the guide to first year practice of law and rolled that out at the induction ceremony and at the induction ceremonies of local Young Lawyers Association. Our programming committee has also put on a financial literacy and marketing and business development presentations for young lawyers. And in the future, we'll be developing more program and align with President Gibson's initiatives, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We can also awarded diversity scholarships to 3 law students. First place award was to a Baylor law student. The second was to a UT law student. Third to a student from the University of Houston who had shared impactful stories about overcoming various challenges throughout their lives and how that influenced them to go to law school and become lawyers and joining the legal profession with a passion to help serve others who are experiencing legal issues arising from similar hardships such as domestic violence and the challenges with immigration, and being advocates for others who are experiencing those hardships in their life. Another resource that we've completed is a nonprofit guide for young lawyers and other young professionals and anyone else interested in joining a nonprofit board that comprehensively covers pretty much every single aspect and concern that somebody who's about to join a board or is new to a nonprofit board can really understand their duties to the organization. For our service to the public, we completed an adoption FAQ resource that was one of the initiatives of Janine Rispoli last year and her passions of promoting information about adoption. And in addition to that, our big public service project for the year, I'm happy and proud to report that it is almost completely done, and I'll ask Jennifer if you'll be able to pull up the website. So how Texas courts work was one of our big projects for the year, one of our 3 big projects, to educate the public about the operation and the system of justice in Texas courts. There were hundreds of volunteer hours that went into completing this resource. And if you'll scroll down a little bit to see this interactive Texas map where you can learn about the different levels of courts. And as you scroll down through the website, you scroll down a little bit to the litigant section. These videos were put together with a lot of hours of volunteer work from our board and the participants in the videos, including judges, practitioners from both sides of the bar for different types of cases, so that anybody who is in one of like the most frequent types of cases that we see, whether it's divorce, a traffic ticket, a DWI, or a car accident, can watch these videos and get perspectives and information about how to manage their expectations through this process, in what to expect in those different case types, as well as an overview of the Texas courts. The website is supposed to flow to allow people who are going through this process to learn also about how to hire a lawyer and things to consider when making a selection as to representation for counsel. Throughout the website, if you keep scrolling down, you'll see resources for both members of the media and for attorneys and dealing with members of the media for how to interact with each other to ensure that reporting on trials and appellate court decisions is accurate and informative rather than sensationalized and misleading. Another important part of this project is our jury service video. We had several justices and judges, including Justice Jeff Boyd, update our jury service video that is used by courts throughout the state to welcome jurors to jury service and to communicate the importance of their service to the Texas justice system. If you'll scroll back up to the top, you'll see a tab for students on the very right. This is the second component of the website, which is an educational component designed for high school students to simulate the process of trying to resolve disputed issues of fact through simulating the jury deliberation process. We had board member volunteers to record essentially a mock trial at 2 different types of cases, and where witnesses were being interviewed. And so we have 2 different cases, and the class activity is to watch both videos and to decide who do they believe and why. On this page, there's also tips and information for how to assess speaker credibility and writer credibility. And going back to what was just mentioned with our implicit biases, and with one of the previous discussions about changing the rules, about understanding that way that different people perceive things. If you scroll down a little bit further, we introduce the concept of illusions from pop culture, such as the audio illusions and optical illusions, where 2 people can be looking at the exact same thing and see and hear 2 totally different things, as a way to expand perspective of young people who are about to become of voting age, and of age to serve on a jury to realize that just because they perceive something in one way, it doesn't necessarily mean that's true. And the whole goal of the process is to deliberate and for the class to participate together and discuss who do they believe and why based on an actual deliberative discussion. So I'm super proud of our public service committee co-chaired. I'd like to note Courtney White and her tremendous amount of work on this project and coordinating with the committee and all the volunteers that came together for these videos and with our vendor Scott Collins at Culture Farm to make this happen. A lot of work went into this on the front end so that could be ready halfway through the year so that we can spend the next half of the year rolling this project out and making sure that it's impactful and carrying out our mission of improving the quality of legal services and informing the education about the role of lawyers in the justice system. Almost to the end of my report of moderate length, just a few upcoming events I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. The first is our Wellness Summit, which will be later this week. It starts on Thursday. We'll be covering topics about how young lawyers and lawyers generally can improve wellness and mental health with a focus on suicide prevention along the lines of President Gibson's one of her main initiatives. We'll also be having our board meeting in Houston at the Magnolia Hotel this weekend, and that will be our third quarterly board meeting. In addition to the program that we've already done, we'll also have another program about how to avoid grievances and what to do whenever you get a grievance filed against you for young lawyers. Just making sure that this topic of being informed about the grievance process and how it works stays relevant and on people's minds, and that the State Bar is here to help them with information about that process if they're ever brought into it. Our other upcoming big event is our national trial competition that will be held in San Antonio at the end of March, beginning of April. This NTC is one of our other big programs that really puts TYLA on the map and State Bar on the map nationally, and helps maintain the State Bar as the gold standard for providing outstanding membership, outstanding programming, not only to the public and our members, but law students will be the future members of the bar. So unless anyone has any questions, that concludes my president's report.
Do any directors have any comments or questions for TYLA President Michael Ritter? If so, please raise your hand. Well, thank you. You guys continue to amaze us in all the work you accomplish in such a short period of time. I look forward to seeing you and later in Houston at the Magnolia Hotel. And we'll also have two of the candidates for President-elect address the TYLA board. So we're looking forward to it, and keep up the great work. That takes us to item 16 on our agenda, the report from our liaison of the Texas Supreme Court. I understand that Justice Lerman had a conflict at the last minute, and we'll be getting our presentation from Nina Hessu, the General Counsel to the Texas Supreme Court. Ms. Hessu, let me turn the floor over to you for your report.
Thank you, Laura. I have a very short report. I hope it's less than a minute. I just wanted to share one important piece of information with you all, which is that the court renewed our 59th general emergency order in very late December, and we renewed it through February 1st. That timing dovetails to some extent with the potential effective date for the remote participation rules. Those are anxiously awaited by, I think, many attorneys and judges throughout the state. And the plan is for those remote participation rules to take effect February 1st, absent any unforeseen circumstances. So we did put those for public comment, received 44 comments in total, and they were overwhelmingly positive. Lots of stakeholders felt that we had already taken their questions, concerns, and suggestions into consideration in drafting those proposed rules. And so we were happy with the feedback received and moving forward on that front. And that's all I have to share today.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the directors for Nina Hessu? If so, raise your hand, please. Seeing none, well, thank you to the court for the hard work y'all done about remote proceedings. It's going to make the lives of our litigants and our population much easier.
Thank you.
So that takes us now to agenda item 17, our report from the General Counsel, Ross Fisher. Mr. Fisher, I'll call on you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Since we last met, I have been called upon by the in-house legal counsel to help them analyze some provisions that are utilized by other state bars across the country and determine whether or not those provide any flexibility for us in light of the State Bar Act. So I'm working with them on that. And otherwise, it's been pretty quiet since then. Not much else to report.
All right, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the directors of our General Counsel, Ross Fisher? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that moves us to agenda item 18, report from our legal counsel. I have been informed by Brad Johnson and Chris Ritter that there are no matters other than those to be taken in the closed session. So it is now 12:39 p.m. and the State Bar Board of Directors Executive Committee will now recess the open meeting and reconvene in closed session as authorized by Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel regarding the Bennett versus State Bar of Texas litigation as authorized by the Texas Government Code Section 551.074 to deliberate regarding personnel matters. With the exception of board liaisons and section representatives, all other individuals, including non-essential staff and other guests, need to excuse themselves from the closed session. Those persons who are entitled to participate in the closed session will be moved to the closed session by the moderator. We will notify the public when we are 5 minutes away from returning to our open session. So if you are not allowed to remain in the room for the closed session, please depart the room and we'll proceed in closed session as soon as that has been effectuated. It is now 12:47 p.m. and the open session of the Board of Directors Executive Committee meeting will now reconvene. During the closed session, only matters relating to the consultation with legal counsel regarding the Bennett versus State Bar of Texas litigation were discussed. No actions was taken in the closed session. That takes us to agenda item number 19. Do I have a motion to adjourn the executive committee meeting?
So moved.
Director Kenan Wooten has moved to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Kellyanne.
I think, who was my second? I think it was,
Let
Director
Kellyanne
Clark.
have it.
I think it was Director Clark. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
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 All those opposed, signify by saying nay. The meeting is adjourned, and I look forward to seeing you all in Bryan, College Station, Texas, later this month. Have a good rest of your month. Thank you for your time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.